Lillian Barnard joins me on the podcast today, the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer at Microsoft South Africa. With more than 20 years of experience in the ICT industry, Lillian is a seasoned professional with proven capabilities and a strong understanding of the local markets. She has held various executive positions, both locally in South Africa and internationally. And as such, she has gained experience and knowledge in sales, operations, business control, strategy, business transformation, but above all, leadership. This experience that she's had along her journey, combined with her deep industry knowledge, positions her perfect to deliver on Microsoft South Africa's digital transformation ambitions, empowering governments, organizations, and individuals to achieve more. Lillian is known for building strong and high performance teams that consistently deliver on their financial targets, results, and goals and outcomes, while also bringing innovative digital solutions to her partners, her customers, and the people that she represents. Having led large teams both locally and internationally, she's recognized for her strength in developing people and creating an environment where everyone can do their best work. She's passionate about enabling a truly diverse and inclusive workplace. By drawing on her own experiences, she creates a culture that enables people to bring out their authentic selves and a workplace to be embraced by that individuality. I've asked Lillian to come on board because not only have I been a massive fan, but I'm truly admire the impact and leadership that you perform on a daily basis. So without further ado, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Rashawn, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You have a tremendous background, and I've obviously captured quite a bit there, but I'm always keen to start off with the very early days. If you could take a moment to maybe share a little bit about, how your career started and what was that very first job in your journey?
So thank you for that. So I've been in ICT for 25 years, and as you've mentioned, I've held various leadership positions, both in South Africa, abroad, lived in Europe for 7 years, in France and in Switzerland. But I actually started out my career as a graduate hire with IBM. At the time, it was just at the dawn of a new era in South Africa. And we were actually called the Rainbow Hires because it was one of the most diverse groups that they've actually hired in a long time. So from a young age, actually very grateful for the parents I've had because they've made me realize the power of learning and the role of education. They've laid a firm foundation and kept me grounded. And at the age of 12, I was very clear that I wanted to go to university to pursue a commerce degree. I was very fortunate to be afforded the opportunity to realize, this dream because it was the exception rather than the norm during those days. At the age of 21, done and dusted with 2 degrees, and my solid educational base opened doors of opportunities for me, which I grabbed with both hands. I strongly believe that if you continue to invest in your own learning and your development, it will actually help you set out not just a great path for your career, but also help you to become a great leader. Passionate advocate about mentorship because I've been mentored by so many great people in and outside of the industry, people also locally and abroad. And they've actually helped me build some of the fundamental, cornerstones of my career. So it was just fantastic to be part, of that graduate intake program. And I always say this, that my first leadership break came at the age of 28, and that is actually where it all started. It was an incredible position that I got entrusted with, and it was truly the beginning of my learning journey when it comes to leadership, culture, achieving your objectives, and making sure that you do take people along with you in their journey.
I have a massive admiration for a lot that you do just from a people impact perspective, right? You seem to have this way, this knack to rally troops around you and believe in a vision and be on that journey with you as you've described. And I love how you broke it down there and articulated the key component of your parents, of the individuals that actually supported you, but then a strong element of education around that really supported that. And then also the mentors and the people that have supported you on that journey along the way. And then you also had a very early start into your leadership influence at the age of 20. I'm very curious to know, in addition to some of those things you've described there, were there anything else that you believe you would have taken from your parents, some key components and lessons, life lessons that they would have taught you to be so impactful in this leadership journey that you've been on?
Talking about mentorship, my parents for me were my first mentors. And we don't always think about it in that context, because there's a lot of basics that come with your upbringing, things such as being selfless, being humble, the whole ethic around working hard, for the things you want, integrity, always tell the truth, having good manners. These things sound very basic,
Right.
but if you actually would professionally package it, you realize that it actually becomes meaningful as well in a professional context. Because some of these values, for me, it becomes, the well from which I draw. It has actually stood me in very good stead. And with some of the professional grounding that I got, I found that it has actually helped molded me as a leader.
So I love how you describe that, right? And even though it might sound basic as well, a lot of those values, those traits, those attributes contribute to eventually your DNA as a leader, just in terms of how you represent your organization, your team, your partners, your customers, etc., to make the ultimate impact. But going back to your career for a second, right? So a lot of those attributes, a lot of those leadership lessons, the education around it, but also the mentors along the way, you've had some really impactful senior executive roles. For the up and coming individuals that are watching this, that are listening to this, that are also on that trajectory of leadership, and they're also going out there trying to get exposed and create a brand for some of these senior roles, like what would you say there were any key specific moments or elements in your journey that you've had to do to stand out or create a brand for yourself to be exposed to some of these senior executive roles?
For me, it's passion. Very important. Be passionate about what you do.
Right.
When you do something, go the extra mile. What do they say? The journey called the extra mile is still the road less traveled. Make sure that you burn the midnight oil and you produce work that you are ultimately exceptionally proud of, right? Because we know that passion can convert you from average to excellent, and that is what passion does. So be passionate about your work. And then people say, how do I know what I'm passionate about? How do I start? And I always say this, that Prashant, in the beginning of your career, it's very difficult to pick the things that you think you could be passionate about without trying new things. So I always say that be open for new opportunities, embrace challenge, try many new things, because you will never know. Love what you do before you're able to do what you love, right? Before you can draw that extinction. And when you start trying different things, in fact, in some areas where you thought you may not be good, you would find that you would surprise yourself. Find your purpose and try to do this early, and which is your why. As I've explained to you, that I got into leadership very early at the age of 28. And it's important for you to give your power. You need to give your power purpose. And I often use this quote, which I love very much, from John Maxwell, which says that, your true power is to empower. And for you to understand, once you have the power, it's actually what you can do for people with what you have accomplished. And because if you don't contextualize it, it's very dangerous, right? Because you could easily become, to an extent, almost self-absorbent. Very important to ensure that you contribute to others. And in Microsoft, we're very fortunate. We talk about contribute to the success of others. And whether you're striving for leadership or whether you just want to be part of a very collaborative team, nothing you'll ever do that would be of great value you'll ever do as an individual, right? You will always do that in the context of a team, but it is about really about being bold and about being brave and just really put your hand up for stretched assignments. If I think about my own career, what kind of differentiated me in the beginning was that I used to put up my hand a lot for stretch assignments and say, I'll do this, I'll try this. And of course, there's always the fear of failure, but hey, what if it works?
It's really taking that moment of going into the uncomfortable zone, right? And stretching outside your current responsibility of tasks and getting that experience and that exposure and building that additional skill set that organically creates that brand. I love how you articulated the value that you add to others as well. And I love the John Maxwell quote, by the way. That was pretty good. In my research, I noticed that you pay it forward quite a bit. Pay it forward and you focus a lot on some key components of human being and people's success around diversity and inclusion, around self-care and well-being, around fostering a culture of creativity and ideas, and all those things, how they drive results and drive business outcomes essentially. You have a methodology and you have a process of how you scale that and how you're very intentional with it, right? I'm super curious about leadership specifically in terms of what are your thoughts or what do you do to foster and expose and exercise that desire within your organization to bring up the up and coming people that have passion for leadership.
So, Rushan, thank you for that question. And, diversity and inclusion is a very important subject given where we are in history and even in the context of our own country. And I just love, our values at Microsoft and just the way that we put it, because we talk about creating an environment where the right conditions are in place so that everyone can do their best work. And when we create those environments, people will ultimately bring their authentic selves to the workplace and ultimately celebrate their own individuality. And that is why I continue to emphasize this whole notion around inclusion, because everybody wants to be part of something. Everybody wants to be seen. People want to be heard. I'm taking it from my own journey. I know what exclusion feels like. And, we say that if you do not intentionally include, you unintentionally exclude. And for me, I always believe it starts with the tone that you set as a leader. When you show up as your authentic self, you almost give others permission to do the same, right? You free people where they realize that, hey, I can show up as the truest version of myself. And what does it mean when I say show up authentically? It means that as leaders, sometimes you sit in a meeting, you're not afraid to ask questions because you don't know, right? Because gone are the days when leaders, so to speak, know all the answers. We don't. And what they psychologically do for people, they realize, hey, actually, there is, complete freedom here and there's no need to fear, because we are learning, in an environment where we are all encouraged by our culture in Microsoft to really have a growth mindset and understanding that you are continuously learning as an individual. Also, what I'm trying to do is to make sure that I continue to listen and I continue to learn. And it's so important that we get to understand the definition of inclusion and what people expect from it, because often what I believe it is and what you may believe it is, it may often not be the same thing. And we have inclusive dialogues where you get to do roundtables with people to get to understand, what the pulse is of the organization and where people are and what you can do as a leader to make sure that you create a more inclusive environment. And I believe, thirdly, it's about coming together as a leadership team and as a management team to ultimately set, that tone from the top, making sure that you create a platform, you create opportunities for others, you create acceptance, right, to a point where there's trust, love, and respect. And we come to a realization that it is about leveraging, the power of our differences and our similarities to integrate it into a culture where all of us could come together, do our best work, and ultimately achieve a common objective.
There's three big things that I'm picking up from that, right? It's that number one thing of leading from the front. It's modeling that authenticity as a leader. There's the other thing of creating that space of not having people be excluded, but rather included with their input, their feedback, or even just asking questions. And then there's the third piece that you talked about there, which I really, really appreciated how you described it actually, is leadership is not knowing all the answers, but having that humility to understand that you don't have all the answers, to solicit that inclusivity of the people around you to help you get the answers, right? Or to help you get the information. And I loved how you described it. So thank you so much. Lillian, what has been one of your biggest failures as a leader?
Now, you know that, Rashawn, that we are encouraged Microsoft to have a growth mindset to make sure that we don't dwell on our failures, but rather ask ourselves, what do we learn from it, right? And because you equally learn from both your failures as well as your successes. And but if I think of just one of the challenging situations which I've experienced, and I've now told you that I've managed to build an international career, and I remember moving countries, that you can easily make very obvious mistakes because you don't understand cultural context, right? And that is why it's so important for leaders to listen, to observe, to try and understand. And one of the things that I've learned, at least when I got to Europe, was that it's so important for you to meet people where they're at, because what kind of worked for me in my leadership style when I was in South Africa, I couldn't necessarily cut, copy, paste that in a very different cultural environment, right? So as much as people needed to understand where I was coming from, I needed to understand their context as well. And then when you realize that, it becomes very humbling, because you realize that, hey, you can't look at things or anything literally at face value, right? You must always look at the deeper meaning. And here's the beauty: when you start taking an interest in people and they know it, and you're trying to understand it, it's amazing what you can ultimately accomplish through them and also accomplish together.
So that is very powerful, and it lands very well with me personally, right? That cultural adaptability and that immersing yourself into different cultures and understanding different individuals, right? Because obviously I've traveled quite a bit as well, and I feel like that's a key component, regardless of how senior you might be or how strong your resume or your track record is. It doesn't contribute to that cultural adaptability and immersion of different cultures, because every culture, every individual has their own differences and their own diverse backgrounds, right? And that key element of learning about them, as you've described it, is a key to success, right? And it's interesting how when you miss that, that can be a bigger failure, regardless of the track record and the success and all the great business results, etc. What do you say today on a different topic? What do you say to up and coming leaders that are looking to hone in on their craft, in addition to everything else you've talked about, from a diversity and inclusion perspective, from an impact to people perspective, from a mentorship and coaching perspective? What are the other key pieces of advice that you have for up and coming leaders today looking to hone in on their craft?
I would say be resilient. And people have been tested quite a bit, even in the last year, 18 months, right? So much has happened in the world, so much has changed. But I would still say be resilient and build your tenacity, even for your own career, because one of my key learnings through my career is that, career paths aren't linear. I don't know why we think when we come out of university that, hey, I'm going to go from mountaintop to mountaintop to mountaintop, because you just don't,
That's
right?
right.
There's a lot of valleys along the way, and I can almost go as far as saying that there are more valleys than mountaintops. The unfortunate part is that we only tend to record the mountaintops. So when people kind of look at, the highlight reel of your career, they just see like, wow. And when people get to read your bio, they go, wow. Really, there's a lot of points in between where you can talk about moments where things did not go very well, where things did not work out, and where you were told, hey, sorry, not you, we're going to promote somebody else, or sorry, not now, or you're not ready, right? So there are those moments where things just don't work out, and then what do you do to make sure that you don't throw in the towel and understand that building a meaningful career is a marathon and not a sprint? It's important for you to build on your resilience so that you can, every time you have a setback, you can bounce forward. Because I know we used to say, let me bounce back from adversity, but it's better to try and bounce forward from adversity so that you can literally, some of these tough situations that you may experience, you can literally outsmart them to make sure that you ultimately reach your fullest career potential. And I would say as well, maybe to add just another one or two to this, is have confidence, have faith in your abilities. Believe you can, because sometimes we exclude ourselves out of the race because we don't even believe that we can. And maybe the last point to mention here is to say have courage. Courage is something you must work on daily. You need to exercise it daily. It takes courage to build a meaningful career. It takes courage, to go after your goals. And the big things you did yesterday will become small things tomorrow. So you better work on your courage, right? To continue to go and knock on some of those big doors until they open.
So what I take from that, Lillian, is immediately addressing that element of entitlement quickly, appreciating the harsh realities of the mountains and the hills, and then having that resiliency of continuing to plug forward, and then the confidence and the courage as well to continuously take on and believe in where you should put the most stock, which is in yourself. And I love that. Last but not least, tremendous conversation, firstly, thank you. But last but not least, much, much, much longer from now, when the journey is all said and done, what is it that you want to be known for?
I do often get this question, Rashawn, and I posted this on my LinkedIn timeline, and I used the two words talking about we should pursue significance as much as we pursue success, because often success is for us, but significance is something much bigger, is something bigger than us, because significance profoundly include others and what you can do through you for others. And what I want to be known for in some of the legacies that I would love to leave in many of my, in my leadership journey, and many even of the roles that I've occupied, is that I've helped others move forward in their own journeys. I've helped make things better. I've helped my organization achieve their goals. I've helped my society move forward. I've basically helped the world become a better place.